Joining me now to break all this down and discuss is Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us. We broke this news yesterday as it happened on our air, Putin making that announcement. Given, though, the immediate violation of the ceasefire, I am curious your thoughts in terms of this short-term truce. Can one ever be meaningful in a war, this war? And do you think any kind of short-term truce like this gives an advantage on the battlefield to either side?
Well, first of all, happy Easter to all, and thanks for having me on. Look, I think that short-term ceasefires or truces can be helpful in terms of confidence-building measures if they are abided by both sides. And I think what we've seen is that Vladimir Putin was not serious about this from the get-go. We saw violations within the first 6 hours, according to the Ukrainians. I think it's a reminder here that Vladimir Putin is the aggressor. I think he continues to play the West. And I think we need to have a policy that makes it very clear that there will be ramifications for the kinds of violations that we saw over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there's been a lot of criticism that Putin announced this to kind of appease the Trump administration, given that, the Trump administration said it would move on if there was no progress towards a truce soon. Let me play something for you and have your thoughts on the other side.
The president has spent 87 days at the highest level of his government, repeatedly taking efforts to bring this war to an end. We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully we won't have to do that. No, Marco is right in saying it. We want to see it end.
All right. So with that, we also hear from Ukraine saying that amid the ceasefire, it's been quieter on the front lines, which proves that Russia is, quote, the true cause of the war because of, as soon as Putin scaled back there was less killing. What is the likelihood that Trump will view all of this that way?
Look, obviously, we don't know exactly how Donald Trump is going to view this. I think what's important to remember here is that the Ukrainians offered a 30-day ceasefire, not a 30-hour one. I think they're trying to give a nod to the president's policies. It appears right now that the Ukrainians are doing everything they can to work with this administration. It does look like that Vladimir Putin is the one that is doing everything that he can to work against the existing policies. The question that I think we all have right now is whether there will be ramifications for Russia for violations of this ceasefire, for perpetuating this war. When we say that we're going to walk away from this, what does that mean? Does it mean that we're going to continue to provide support to the Ukrainians, who are, of course, a democracy that are defending themselves right now in a war of aggression? That's the question that I think has yet to be answered amid some of these threats coming out of the White House.
Could you try to answer that a bit in terms of probability? Do you think there will be ramifications?
Look, I'm not sure. I think that's the big question. We have an administration that I think would like to wipe its hands clean of all of this. And I think, justifiably, we don't want to keep throwing good money after bad in a war that won't end. And so there is frustration, I think some justifiable frustration from this White House. But I do think that if we see the Russians as continuing to engage in aggression the way they have, we may have no choice but to continue to support the Ukrainians in the way that we have in the past.
I mean, on that note, there's been a lot of criticism, even in the last, 48 hours, saying that President Trump claimed on the campaign trail several times that he could end this war before he went to office in one day. Just take a listen.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after I win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, we're going to get that war ended. I'm going to try, and I think I can, get it ended as president-elect. In other words, before I even take over the White House.
What is your reaction to him now saying that that was just sarcasm on the campaign trail and that he will move on if there is no progress soon?
Look, those were campaign promises. We know that a lot of promises are made of the campaign trail. You can't always make good on them. I think what the president is learning right now is that this stuff is hard. I do think that he could probably do himself a favor by maybe lightening the load of Stephen Witkoff, his chief negotiator, his envoy, who appears to be really spread thin right now between Russia, Gaza, Iran. He's got a lot on his plate. Maybe split this thing up a little bit and let others take over. Marco Rubio is a deft negotiator himself. Maybe others can come in too. But this was not going to be settled in a matter of days or weeks. It will likely take months, and it requires hard work, but it also requires goodwill on the part of both sides. And I'm not sure we're seeing it from Vladimir Putin right now.
Yeah, we're going to continue to follow this story. As you mentioned, Rubio going to potentially take the lead here. Really appreciate your time and insight. Executive Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Jonathan Schanzer. Thank you so much.